So good afternoon. This is Marcia Waters, the Director of Doors Division of Real Estate. Today is December 18th, 2023, and the time is 2:04 p.m. I will now call the meeting to order. Before I call roll, I would like to advise the task force and members of the public that while the Division of Real Estate has been tasked with leading this task force and ultimately the issuance of the task force report, the views, opinions, and recommendations discussed and expressed by the task force are not the views, opinions, or recommendations of the Division of Real Estate or the Department of Regulatory Agencies. And I will now call roll. Jose Trujillo.
Here.
Brian Matisse.
Present.
Burton Adler.
Present.
Christopher Elliott.
Here.
Dr. Davis. She's gone. Representative Parenti.
Here.
Senator Gonzalez. Natasha O'Flaherty. Barry Wilson. Marianne McGreedy. Jennifer Tanaka. And Steve Odoricio.
I'm present.
And Sarah, I'll turn it over to you now.
Fantastic. Thank you, Marcia, for kicking us off. So again, for those of you who perhaps missed the first meeting, my name is Sarah Reynolds. I'm with the consulting team of Elevate Momentum that is leading this effort for the task force this year. So thank you again for everyone for joining us, whether you're online or here on the webinar. Wanted to just start our meeting, as we will all of our meetings, reviewing a few meeting norms. Many of you are probably familiar with meeting norms. That's very common when you are when you're leading meetings, that you have just some shared principles and some shared agreements that just help ensure that the conversation remains constructive and also helps us fulfill the objectives of this task force. So again, these probably are not going to be unfamiliar to many of you, but just as our first meeting norm, we do expect everyone to be prepared and to review the materials that we send to you in advance. We have at each meeting, we have a lot of material that we need to cover as a group. And so the more prepared you can be and read those materials, the better our conversation can go and the more informed we'll all be. Also, best practice to just remain present. So that means refraining from attending to outside business while we are here in our conversations and just listen attentively to your peers. Also, as best practice, just keep your camera on and be on mute when you're not talking so we don't have background noise. Also, we want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to participate. So this means being patient while others are speaking and also being mindful of sharing time so that we have a chance to gather everybody's contributions. Again, these 2 hours are going to go very fast and everybody's experiences and perspectives have equal value. So there may be times in the conversation where I might interject myself and intervene just to create some space in that discussion and allow others who maybe have not had a chance to contribute, give them that chance to be able to speak up. Also, assume best intentions of everyone. We know that in order to be constructive, we have to respectfully challenge ideas, but not necessarily individuals. And then lastly, stay on point and stay on time. We do have a lot of material to cover. So once we do thoroughly discuss something, we will be moving forward so that we have a chance to get to all of the topics that folks need to discuss. And the last thing I just wanted to point out, it's not necessarily a norm, it's more of just a heads up. We are tasked with producing a very thorough report of all of these meetings. And so there might be times for the benefits of those notes where I might pause the conversation and just ask some clarifying questions just to make sure that we are capturing the information correctly so that that report is, again, as clear and as factual and complete as possible. So today's agenda, the overall structure will be similar to most of our meetings going forward. First, we are going to have Metro District 101 presentation from Julie Stackhouse, which will be followed by a very short period of Q&A. Second, we will have a presentation from Zachary White, and that will also have a short period of Q&A. And his topic will be communications with homeowners about Metropolitan District processes and homeowners' rights and responsibilities. That is the language directly out of the legislation, but we've also been referring to this generally as disclosures and transparency. So we'll be hearing from Zachary second, and then we will transition into our task force discussion with the 3 prompts that were provided to you in advance. So just a couple of things to just bear in mind with our 2 guest speakers today. As we've noted before, we really believe that education is foundational to having a good understanding of any topic before we begin. And so we will be focusing on just that understanding of current practices and statutes. We've asked these guest speakers to be here as just subject matter experts, and they are here to just support your work by delivering that factual information, but not offering any personal opinions. So as we hear some of this content, you have some really good points you want to raise and questions you'd like to debate. That's fabulous. Hold on to that, and we will have time for that debate when we get to the discussion part of our agenda. So with that, I will go ahead and introduce our first speaker today. We have Julie Stackhouse, and Julie is a retired executive vice president of the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, where she was responsible for banking supervision and numerous other functions. Upon moving to Fort Collins, she became an active community volunteer who has served on several boards and commissions for both nonprofit and government agencies, including the Fort Collins Planning and Zoning Commission. Through her volunteer leadership roles and role as a director of Simmons Bank in Arkansas, she's developed a wealth of knowledge on the topic of metro districts and recently has been called upon to share her expertise. So Julie, I understand you have a PowerPoint that you'll be sharing with us, so you can go ahead and pull that up, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. And let's see if I can do this well. 1 second here. Okay, I think I've got it. I'm pretty impressed.
You're good, yes.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you to all of you for letting me visit with you today. And thank you for becoming part of this task force and the important responsibility you have. This is not an easy topic, but my role today is very narrow. As Sarah said, it is just to cover the basics of metro districts with the goal of setting a similar foundation for the entire group. So let's get started with the fundamental question of what is a metro district. And maybe by now you're going, well, that's too basic for me, but bear with me as I cover it. A metro district is a special purpose district that has been formed under Title 32 of the Colorado State Statutes. It is different from other special purpose districts that many citizens have heard of, such as school districts and library districts, in that it provides at least 2 types of services. That's actually one of the common misunderstandings I hear is, well, it's sort of like a library district, but yet importantly, it provides at least 2 types of services. Now, in a residential metric district, which is the focus of your conversation, those 2 services will generally be associated with public infrastructure of the development. And that could include things like streets, water, sewer, or fire services, but it can also include recreational amenities, such as parks, pools, trails, and event spaces. Because of that latter, many people confuse metro districts with homeowners associations. And metro districts, by definition, are not homeowners associations. However, the district itself has the authority to finance, design, develop, and maintain the district's features, structures, and services. So to a typical citizen, it may not be clear that the metro district is the entity, not a homes association. Oops. So why in Colorado? I know many of you have seen data like this. It's, I think, pretty impressive. Metro districts are obviously very prevalent in Colorado. This data from Zonda, Colorado, which is a residential data firm, shows that about 87% of new home closings in 2023 through August 31st were located in a metro district. These tend to be big entities with a lot of people buying into them. And that volume has increased substantially since 2014. Now, what's important to understand is this is the same period where we've seen substantial population growth in Colorado. I'll admit I'm one of them that has moved to Colorado during this time. According to USA Facts, Colorado's population grew 8.6% from 2014 to 2021, which is the latest data they have published, while the US population has grown at an average of 4.2%. So I came from Missouri. This is not Missouri, what we're seeing in Colorado in terms of growth. And according to estimates, Colorado is somewhere in the range of 127,000 housing units short for its current population. So that leads to the obvious question then of, well, why are metro districts used to solve this problem? Well, I did mention that population is increasing quickly. And from the standpoint of my background, which is finance and economics, the answer to any price problem is typically increasing supply. So that is ideally what you'd like to do in Colorado, is increase housing supply and in turn bring prices down, or at least keep prices manageable for many people. Slow growth states like Missouri do not need this type of tool, nor do areas that are really already built out. Think of Boulder, Colorado as an example. But there's more there than just the fact that we're growing quickly. There's a lot of history. So if you go back and you look at how development was done decades ago, it used to be that the communities themselves paid for development of new parts of the community through community tax revenues. That system changed many decades ago for the philosophy of development should pay its own way. In other words, the people that live in the area being developed should pay for that development, which means that the developers need to pay for those costs of infrastructure and improvements. There are a couple of other things, though, that affect Colorado specifically, and that is the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, TABOR, and the Gallagher Amendment. And I'll just refer to it as TABOR and Gallagher from this point forward. So in 1992, TABOR limited the amount of tax revenue that all levels of government could collect or spend without voter approval. In turn, this made it much harder for governments to fund additional infrastructure through property tax increases if they wanted to do that, which is a separate question, and it would require voter approval. Related to that is the Gallagher Amendment, which, among other things, reduced the general tax burden on residential properties in order to maintain a statewide split between residential and non-residential properties. There's quite a mathematical equation associated with that. But here's the bottom line. While we in Colorado have very high property values, and therefore we look at our tax bill and see that it's large, the reality is our tax rate is very low compared to other states in the country for the reason of this amendment. So now let's bring it all together. What do we have? Number one, a high growth state with the need for housing quickly and a lot of it. Two, constitutional measures that create incentives. And three, the decades-old requirement that development pay its own way. So all of these serve to incentivize the use of metro districts here in Colorado. So moving on to financing, as I mentioned earlier, it would be ideal if supply channels just could keep up with the demand for new housing, and then that would serve to keep the increases more moderate than we've seen in recent years. That's just not happening in Colorado. And of course, we have some very high costs here. One that is unusually high is the cost of water. And I know that I can attest to that because we built our house and I was shocked at just how much water cost. But in any event, developers have turned to metro districts for many reasons, but one of it is to use bonds to finance a portion of the infrastructure cost. And bonds, if you're not familiar with financial markets, are just a debt instrument issued to investors. And then the concept is that the purchaser pays less for the home upfront at the day of purchase, but it pays for the cost of the bonds over time. So those that live in the district then assume that responsibility. And this type of property tax to finance the repayment of the bonds is called a debt service mill levy. Investors, although these are high-risk bonds, and I'll speak to that later, have the benefit of the bonds being issued by a government entity, so the interest is tax exempt. But that doesn't mean that these are inexpensive. In fact, they're expensive. And it's important to think of it this way. A metro district is typically formed at the earliest stages of the development. And so at that point, there's no assurance that the homes will be completed or that the development itself will be finished. So the purchasers of the bonds are taking on that risk by buying the bonds. And as a result, they require a risk-adjusted rate of return. So this is not going to be a treasury rate. This is going to be a very expensive rate for the risk being taken on. Now, I'm sometimes asked, well, what about the banks? Why aren't they doing this? And banks do some type of underwriting of small land development loans and, of course, housing construction loans. But what I saw prior to the housing crisis in 2007 and 2008, and I did live through that, was that banks took on a lot of this type of lending. And then the housing crisis hit, and we had over 500 banks fail in this country. It was a very, very hard time. And because of these concentrations in land development loans, which was primarily the reason for bank failures, regulators responded as you would expect. And today there is commercial real estate concentration guidance. There are requirements on highly volatile commercial real estate, which is where land development loans fall. And there are capital requirements that require more capital for this highly volatile CRE. So in short, after the housing crisis, the underwriting of land development loans changed, and it's now much different, more limited, and certainly more expensive. So let's turn to the area of governance next. And as you hold on your discussions on metro districts, one thing to keep in mind is the municipality in which the metro district is located. So in other words, that could be the city or the county in which the development has occurred. Now that the metro district must secure the approval of a service plan from the municipality before the housing can be constructed. So the municipality has a very important role here. And the service plan, of course, sets out the framework for what is within the metro district, how it must operate, and it includes the maximum debt limits and mill levies that the metro district, for the metro district, and also the powers that it has. Once that is approved, the metro district is then subject to other transparency requirements, and you see those listed on the slide here. And certainly we can make this available to you if you desire. Turning more specifically to the area of transparency, as I mentioned, metro districts are governmental entities, so they are subject to all of the requirements of other governments. And that includes things such as open meetings, open records, annual audits, and public budgeting. Now you may say, well, I don't know how well they do it, and I'm not here today to opine on that. It's just to simply point out that that requirement is there. Metro districts are also subject to several district-specific requirements, and that includes providing notice of the names of directors, taxing information, and the upcoming elections. They must also adopt an annual budget and file an annual audit with the state auditor. In addition to that, and relatively recently, Colorado law requires that real estate contracts now include a bold-face type disclosure that the property is in a special district. The purchaser must also sign a statement acknowledging that at closing, and specifically must acknowledge that the property may be located in a special taxing district and that taxes may increase as a result. So this is a relatively new disclaimer. I haven't seen any information on its efficacy, and probably we won't for a little while, but I think it's an important one. I would be surprised if you hadn't heard of a homeowner who was surprised by an increase in property taxes or increase in taxes in a metro district because of a revaluation of their property. And part of that is a result of the Colorado real estate valuation system, which we know is in arrears. So think of it this way. You purchased a home in a metro district in July of 2020. And at that point, the assessed value might just simply be the parcel of ground that the house was later built on. The next year, you have a house, the property is reassessed, and now you have a higher tax bill because the assessed value has risen. So these new requirements do require a disclosure to home buyers that estimate the amount of taxes they will be paying after the home is built and the value increases. Let's turn to elections at this point and just be sure we're all have the same understanding of what a metro district election process is. So in a metro district, the board of directors is the metro district's governing body, and those eligible to vote in metro district elections are called eligible electors. So here's where people get, I think, a little confused and sometimes say, well, why don't I get to vote on these metro district bonds? And here's the reason. At the time the metro district is organized, there are no residents. So there is no one to vote on the bonds other than the eligible electors at that time, which is typically the owner or the developer of the Metro District. And so that sole owner has complete board control. Now, the residents do become eligible electors once they purchase a property, but of course, by that time, the bond obligations of the district are already in place. So it's really important then to understand when you buy to understand what your obligations are. Of course, all this is necessary to satisfy market debt holders, but I will concede this can be difficult to understand. I'm going to quickly wrap up here with some of the legislation that was passed over in 2023 that affects Metro districts. One of this, HB 23-1105, is you. So congratulations, I guess, for that. But I'd like to turn to Senate Bill 23-110. And this legislation, and I hope you have a copy of it, you will want to have a copy of at least the summary of it, because it requires changes effective January 1, 2024. And among those changes, the service plan is required to include the maximum mill levy that may be imposed for the payment of general obligation indebtedness. It must list the maximum debt that may be issued by the Metro District. It also requires that in addition to any other meetings held by a board of a Metro District, they must hold an annual meeting if the district was organized after January 1st, 2000, and has residential units in its boundaries. Now, at this meeting, the board cannot take any official action, but it must ensure that the meeting includes a presentation from the Metro District regarding the status of public infrastructure problems within the district, outstanding bonds, if any, and a review of unaudited financial statements. And finally, an opportunity for members of the public to seek or to have their questions answered. The board is also required, separate from that, to have a period of public comment during the separate meeting at which they adopt the annual budget of the Metro District. So I'll just close that with a few other smaller items. There's been question about developers purchasing the debt of their own Metro District. This legislation requires that prior to issuing debt to a director of the Metro District or related entity, the board is required to receive a statement of registered municipal security advisor, certifying that the specified limits on the debt, maximum interest rate on the debt have been met. And also after January 1st of next year, the seller of a property located in a Metro District is required to provide the purchaser with the official website of the district. So I ran through that quickly, but I think it's important as you look at the things that you will be recommending to also keep in mind the things that are about to go into place here early in 2024. So I'm going to conclude real quickly with just saying, you know, Colorado is a unique state. It's a wonderful state. I love it here, but it's had rapid growth. It's had a fast need for housing. It has unusual constitutional factors. And like every district, it has a requirement that development pay its own way. All of these have incented Metro districts here in Colorado. I think it is fair to say that at least some, maybe many, purchasers of homes in Metro districts in the past haven't fully understood the obligations they have undertaken, and they should. What we don't know is whether or not the new disclosures and requirements will change that. We have yet to see the efficacy of those to know if we can solve that problem. And finally, I'll just say that I applaud you. I applaud you for taking on this task. I think, yeah, home is one of the most important expenditures that any individual can make. And certainly in my perspective of financial and economic background, education is key. And the more that we can do to bring information and support to our potential homeowners, the better off we are. So I'll stop there, Sarah, and I guess I'll stop sharing my screen and see if we have any time for questions.
Great. Thank you, Julie, so much for that very thorough presentation. Again, many of you on this already are aware of some of this, but now we have at least some starting points for some common understanding of Metro districts. We do just have a couple of moments, so if you have any clarifying questions that you'd like to ask of Julie, now would be your time. And just a reminder that we will be saving the debate and the conversation discussion portion for our facilitated section at the end. So if you have a clarifying question, please go right ahead. Brian, I see your hand is raised. Go right ahead.
Yes, thank you. And I want to thank you, Ms. Stackhouse, for the very comprehensive and quick summary. I do want to clarify a few things. First of all, you said at the very beginning that metro districts provide two or more of the services. And for those people on the call that may not be familiar with Title 32, because you mentioned things like school districts and library districts. I just want to clarify, do you understand that the metro districts have to provide two or more of the services specifically in Title 32? So library districts and school districts, they're not in Title 32. Is that any?
Yeah, Brian, if I can just address that real quickly. So many people use the term special districts and it confuses them because they think library district, they think school district. And so what I really wanted to do was to set out, yes, the list of services that metro districts can provide is set out in Title 32, but it must be two or more of those services, which is the common misunderstanding.
Right, thank you. I just want to clarify that for people listening in. I also have a question for you. You made a statement that metro districts were intended to increase housing supply and keep housing prices manageable. Are you aware, and I guess this is something I've been asking people to try to find information on. In your research, have you found any studies that have indicated that metro districts, in fact, do lower housing costs in Colorado?
Yeah. So, Brian, I haven't looked for any studies to see if metro districts reduce housing costs in Colorado. What I am speaking to today is the sort of the economic construct of metro districts and what they're intended to do. You're asking a very tough question too, particularly when it comes to resale. Is the person reselling the house getting a windfall because someone doesn't understand? But my role today was really just to talk about the economic construct.
Thank you. I was just hoping that maybe you'd come across some because
Yeah.
I haven't seen any. And I've only seen one study, and we will probably talk about that later in the session. I also want to, you made a statement about that purchasers of bonds early in the development take on the risk before there are homes. In my experience, and I'm on the Metro District of Tollgate Crossing, and I've been on several other Metro District boards. Usually at the very beginning, for the first several years, the bonds aren't issued. They're usually advance and reimbursement agreements, and it's not until there's enough homes in a tax base that bonds are issued. At that point, the bonds are issued. Is that your understanding as well?
So I think at this point, for you guys, it'd be best to get a bond issuer who could speak to the number of times they're issued very early in the process versus later in the process. But as you know, these are risky. And so bondholders in these private placements are going to be looking for both the expected success rate of the district, of course, the remuneration that they get. But I definitely think that a bond underwriter would be good for this group.
Okay. One other clarification I wanted to make. You made a statement that there's always an annual audit. Did you, in your studies, are you aware that many special districts, especially early in the process before they've issued bonds, and smaller special districts are not required to have an audit, and instead they can have audit exemptions?
Sure. So you're saying before people, I'm sorry, did someone jump in? Okay.
I don't think so.
So yeah, so I'm not exactly sure I understand the question, Brian, because you're asking, you're saying, do they have to have an audit, or does the homeowner have access to an audit? So it's
no, that wasn't my question. My question was, are you familiar that Colorado law does not require all metro districts to have audits? That in fact, many metro districts, especially those early in the process, and smaller metro districts, are allowed to have audit exemptions in lieu of an audit.
So it's my understanding, at least in a completed metro district, that an audit is required. You're asking early in the process. I just have to see the fact-specific situations to understand that particular point.
Yeah, that's not actually accurate. There is a provision for audit exemptions. I just want you to know. And then one more thing. This is the final thing I wanted to ask about. I just want to clarify. You made a statement about the transparency disclosures, and I just want to clarify that only that bold-faced disclosure that you referenced, which says your property may be in a special taxing district, that's the only one that's required in all real estate sales contracts. The newer requirements only apply to the first sale of homes. In other words, when a home builder sells the homes. So those would, a reseller wouldn't have to make those additional disclosures like the taxes that a metro district typically imposes.
Okay. I'm not sure the question, but
Well, I just wanted to clarify. I wanted to clarify that not all of those disclosures, especially the newer ones that were adopted by the legislature 2 years ago, are made by all sales contracts. The only real estate sales contract that has provision that was required for all of them is that boldface print. The newer requirements, that especially those in 38-35.7-110, they are not required of typical real estate contracts where someone other than the original home builder sells the home. You understand that?
okay, yeah. So I do think, and just to, yeah, I know I've been asked not to give my opinion. I do think it's important that buyers understand what they're purchasing. I think that's key. So anything that you feel is missing in that area, it would be important to discuss.
And I just want to point out, we're going to be doing a deeper dive on that with Zachary's presentation. So that's a perfect segue, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all I had. Thank you.
Yes, that tees up Zachary's presentation very nicely. So we do have our next speaker for this afternoon on that very topic of transparency and disclosure, or it was as it was written in the legislation, communications with homeowners about Metro District processes and homeowners' rights and responsibilities. So for this presentation, we are going to hear from Zachary White. And Zachary is an attorney who's been practicing in the area of special districts law since 2013. He specializes in the formation of special districts and represents both developer represented and homeowner represented metropolitan districts, water districts, and park and recreation districts. Zachary is a native Coloradan and was raised in the Highlands Ranch Metropolitan District. So Zachary, I'm going to go ahead and pull your presentation up for you. And thumbs up if you can see it.
Yep.
Great. All right. I will go ahead and get that into slide mode. Make this go away.
All right. While she gets that up, thank you to everybody for the opportunity to let me speak today and share the current state of the law as it relates to communications with homeowners about metro districts and homeowners' rights and responsibilities. As Sarah noted earlier, the shorthand for this is disclosure and transparency. Sarah, if you could go to the next slide. So the mandate under statute is for the task force to review communications with homeowners about Metropolitan District's processes and homeowner rights and responsibilities. So today I will discuss a couple of things. First, starting with communications, we'll go over some of those required disclosures and other disclosures that special districts, in particular metro districts, make, and notices that are provided to the public during the year. And then we'll talk a little bit about homeowner rights and responsibilities as it relates to the metro districts that they live in. Next slide. So we'll start with some of the required disclosures that a buyer or owner in a metro district will receive or have access to. The state law requires special districts, including metropolitan districts, organized under Title 32 to make disclosures and provide notices to the public. The first is the order of organization. This is the actual order that gets issued by the district court. When a metropolitan district is organized, it's required to be recorded in the clerk and recorder's office where the district is located. That order of organization has a legal description attached to it. So title should pick that up on any title search and provide that as part of the property record information. The next disclosure we commonly call the special district disclosure. It's required by Title 32. Section 104.8. You may also hear of it as a 104.8 disclosure. It's been around for about 10 years, I think, and it's required again to be recorded in the clerk and recorder's office where the district is located. At the time when an order of organization is recorded, so when new districts are organized, you record the order of organization and the special district disclosure. And any time that new territory is included into a special district. When you include new territory into a special district, there's an order from the court that it includes a legal description of that property. This new disclosure gets filed at the same time as that order, letting people know again that they are in a special district. The special district disclosure is required to include the name of the district, a description of the powers the district is authorized to use under its service plan. It's required to include a statement indicating where the district service plan can be found, what information is provided in there, and then a required statement here on the bottom of your slide regarding the powers, including powers to issue debt, powers to levy tax and impose fees, are all in that required statement. So that gets recorded at least once in the life of a metro district. If property is added to the boundaries of that district, it gets recorded. And districts that may have been on inactive status for a period of time, when they return to active status, also record that. Next slide. The next disclosure, this is an annual disclosure. The previous two are, I talked about, you'll see those one, maybe a handful of times. The transparency notice required by 32809. We call it the transparency notice. It's recorded annually by January 15th. I'm sorry, it's provided annually by January 15th. It's not recorded. This is a regularly updated notice. It can be provided in a number of ways. Mailed to each household within the special district, included as part of a newsletter or other statement, letter, or notice sent to eligible electors in the district. Posted on the official website of the district, or also posted through the Special District Association and their website. That notice, again, includes more information related to the address and phone number, the principal office of the district, the name and phone number of any manager or primary contact person for the district, the names and contact information for members of the board of directors, the name of the board chair, and name of each member whose office will be on the next regular special district election. So you'll see who's up for election and what their current terms are. The notice includes the times and places designated for regular meetings of the board and where notice of those meetings is posted. You'll see information related to the current mill levy and the total ad valorem property tax received by the district the prior year. You'll see the date of the next regular special district election, information about the procedure and time to submit a self-nomination to run at the next election, the website for any special district election to post that information, and information about how an eligible elector could apply for permanent absentee voter status with the district. Again, this is an annual notice that's provided by special districts. Next slide. Another annual requirement notice that goes to electors and to state agencies and provides information about the districts is an annual report. These have been required for years. The statute has allowed for them and been required by service plans. Just enacted in the last couple of years, there's now a requirement for districts created after July 1st of 2000 to provide this annual report to the governing body that approved the service plan, the Division of Local Government, the state auditor, and the clerk and recorder to make available for public inspection. This annual report is required to be filed by October 1st of every year. The statute provides that governing bodies can waive the requirement, require earlier filing, and may require additional information as well. Generally, the annual report under statute will describe any boundary changes made during the prior year, any intergovernmental agreements entered into or terminated during the prior year, how to obtain copies of the rules and regulations adopted by the district, a summary of any litigation involving public improvements owned by the special district, the status of construction of any public improvements by the special district, a list of facilities or improvements constructed by the district that were conveyed or dedicated to the county or municipality. Information about the final assessed valuation of the district as of the end of the prior year. A copy of the current year's budget, a copy of audited financial statements, or if the district qualifies to receive an exemption from audit, that application for exemption from audit is also made available. Notice of any uncured defaults existing more than 90 days under a debt instrument are provided, and any information related to the inability of a district to pay its obligations as they come due, which continues beyond 90 days. We do have service plans that include different information, may ask different questions, but these are the statutorily required pieces of information that are now required to be in all annual reports. Next slide. And again, this is a more recently enacted requirement, but all special districts are now required to have a website and to create that website within 1 year of organization and maintain it and annually update it with information. And the statute requires at a minimum, the websites include names, terms, and contact information for current directors and the manager of the district, how to get a hold of them. The current year's budget has to be posted within 30 days of being adopted by the district. We also post amendments to budgets there. The prior year's audited financials or audit exemption application is required to be posted within 30 days of filing that with the state auditor. Annual reports are required to be filed on the website and made available. The regular meeting schedule is required to be posted there by January 30th of every year. Election results are required to be posted. Also a call for nominations if there will be a director election that gets posted. A current map depicting the boundaries of the district is posted, and then any other information that a district would like to provide on that website can also be provided, but this is the minimum requirement for what special districts have to post on their websites and make available to the public. Next slide. Here we'll have a little bit of overlap with our prior presenter, some of her information. These are other disclosures about special districts, not disclosures that are required to be made by metro districts. Again, all purchase contracts within the state are required to include this bold language notifying purchasers of property that they may be purchasing property located within a special taxing district. So that provides notice about the existence of the district itself. Next slide. This one Brian mentioned, owners or builders, we sometimes call this now a builder disclosure. If we can go back to that one. Owners that are selling newly constructed homes are required to provide a disclosure to all of their purchasers prior to the execution of a contract to sell the property, or concurrently with or prior to, I'm sorry. And that's required to include information about the special district. I won't run through all of that, but does include information about the special district itself and how they can find information about that. And next slide. Newly enacted requirement after January 1st of 2024, owners of property that are selling their homes located in metro districts that were organized after January 1 of the year 2000 have to provide the purchaser with the official website established by the district. Sorry, I left a word out there. That information is provided by the Real Estate Commission and is provided to all new purchasers. Next slide. We'll move on from disclosures to notices, additional notices that property owners receive or that metro districts are required to provide. The first is meeting notices. This notice provides the time and location for all meetings, and meetings are required to be posted in accordance with Title 24-6402. Meeting notices also provide information about how public can attend telephonically, if that would be an electronic meeting. Also provide information about how physical presence can be made. The notice is required under Title 24-6402 to be provided no less than 24 hours prior to holding the meeting. That notice is posted in a designated location. Sometimes that's a physical location within the boundaries of the district at a designated location. Sometimes that's also on the district's website. And where possible, the posting includes specific agenda items, information about what will be discussed at that meeting. There are some special actions that require additional notices. The statute requires a special meeting notice to be provided anytime the board will consider making a final determination to issue or refund general obligation debt, so property tax backed debt, consolidating the district, dissolving a district, filing a plan for adjustment of debt under bankruptcy, or entering into a private contract with a director, or not making a scheduled bond payment. Next slide. Additional times that notices are required. Certain actions that a special district may take require a public hearing. And those public hearings typically include or require prior notice by publication. When we adopt budgets, inclusion of territory into a special district or exclusion of territory from the special district, a public hearing is required, and publication of the date and time and location of that public hearing is made in a newspaper of general circulation where the district is located. Other notices that are issued by the district are notices of election. The call for nominations in particular in election years is provided. There are different requirements for districts depending on when they were organized. Districts organized prior to January of the year 2000 are required to provide that notice by publication, and one other method that can include mailing, inclusion in a newsletter, annual report, billing insert or statement, direct letter, voter information cards, or any other type of mailing. Can also be posted on the official website of the district, and under some circumstances, depending on the size of the district and the number of residents, it can be posted physically in the district. Similar requirements for districts that are organized after January 1st of 2000. They're required to actually email the notice to each active registered elector in the district using the registration list provided by the clerk and recorder. If there are eligible electors who have not provided their email address to the clerk and recorder, special districts are actually required to mail a copy of the call for nominations to that residence, and then choose from one additional method of providing that notice. That could be publication, mailing, inclusion in newsletters. Similar, as I previously mentioned, posted on the website. Other notices that are required: anytime a district that furnishes domestic water or sanitary sewer services directly to residents or property owners is going to adjust their rates, they're required to provide notice 30 days in advance of considering that action. And that can be mailed, that can be posted on the website, made part of newsletters or annual reports. It can also be posted on the website of the Division of Local Government or on the district's website itself. Next slide. So we'll shift gears a little bit, talk a little bit about homeowners' rights when they live in a special district. Homeowners have the right to access to meetings. The public must be given access to meetings under the Colorado Sunshine Laws. Those are found in Title 24. All meetings of a quorum of the board at which public business is discussed or formal board action is taken must be open to the public. Homeowners may request individualized notice of all meetings or particular meetings of interest to them that may have only specific topics. Minutes of each meeting are kept and posted. Those are retained in perpetuity. Special districts are also allowed to, under limited circumstances, enter into executive sessions where the public may be excluded, but no official action can be taken in those sessions. The public is entitled to access to records of the districts. All districts are subject to the Colorado Open Records Act, also known as CORA. Districts regularly receive requests for records and comply with those under CORA. They're also required to have access to the board of directors. This is a newer requirement I thought I'd hit here real quick, is for an annual meeting. All special districts in the state that have residential units in them are required to hold an annual meeting, giving residents the ability to talk with members of the board and consultants. At that annual meeting, they receive a presentation of the status of public infrastructure projects, the status of outstanding bonds, if there are any, and a review of year-to-date financial statements compared to the adopted budgets. And then there's an opportunity for questions to the board or members of the consulting staff of the district. So that concludes my slides and presentation for today on required disclosures, transparency, and interaction with homeowners. If there are any questions or clarifications you'd like, I'll be available.
Great, Zachary, thank you. That was very, very thorough. We have a lot to unpack today in our discussion. And so again, just a reminder that we will be doing the debate soon. This is just clarifying questions for Zachary on anything that he spoke about so far. So yes, Representative Parenti, I see your hand raised. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Zach, for presenting. My question was regarding your comments about larger metro districts who can use the county clerk and recorder, or maybe the town. That would be an interesting clarifying question. Town clerk and recorder or county clerk and recorder to determine who their eligible electors are. By going to an election clerk and recorder for that information, are we then excluding any non-voter eligible people from being part of the business of the metro district? And is that intentional? Right? So they can't vote. Like if you're a non-resident, for instance, I live near CU, we've got lots of visiting professors from overseas. Are they not allowed to vote in any matters before the metro district that they are homeowners in?
So when there is an election, and you guys will have later discussions about elections and those processes. But the election officials request from the county lists of eligible electors and property owners within the boundaries of that district to obtain that information.
Great.
So I can't necessarily speak to whether that will include visiting professors from overseas or whoever it may be, but and you'll have that election discussion at a later time, but the notices of the call for nominations are provided to those eligible electors that are provided to the district by the county clerks and recorders.
If I could just do one clarifying follow-up, Sarah?
Yes,
Sure.
go ahead.
So just to clarify, that information is coming from the property owner records, not from election records.
The clerks and recorders, the county has property owner lists that they provide, and they have lists of registered electors. And you provide them a legal description of the district, and they send you back a list of eligible electors within that defined area.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Additional clarifying questions for Zachary. I also want to know, I believe, Zachary, you will be staying on for our discussion. So if technical questions do come up, we can phone a friend and have you help us out with that. Excellent. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and transition to the good part, which is our discussion on disclosures and transparency as our topic for today. And so just a reminder that our objective today at this meeting is not necessarily to reach consensus on these topics, but to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to share and contribute some of their experience and expertise. So I'm going to be leaning on our meeting norms that we discussed earlier in our call today, just to help get us to a really good outcome of this discussion. So the 3 facilitated questions were provided to you in the agenda and the pre-read materials, but just as a refresh, we are going to be starting with what works well with existing law or existing practice. Then we'll talk about what's not working well with existing law or practice. And then we're going to talk about suggestions for improvement on this topic. Again, for the purposes of this report and to just make the outcome as valuable as possible, your constructive suggestions are going to be really important to make sure that we make this as valuable as possible to all of our end users. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump right in. And so as it relates to transparencies and disclosure, what about the current policy or practice is really working well? It's high functioning and it's having it is achieving its goals in terms of being effective and doing its job. So Bert, I see your hand raised. Are you ready to jump in with what's working well?
No, I have a quick
Okay.
people getting mails, materials, and I've never received any materials before any meeting. I just want to know I get that.
So you have a question just clarifying the mailing requirements for special districts for sending notice out to residents. Is that correct?
No, I'm asking about the materials that go to this committee that we are currently on, because I've never received any.
Oh, right. All right. So this is probably a question to Dora. If you guys can just chime in real briefly on your process, because I believe materials are emailed in advance. Is that correct?
So we've got a Google Drive folder that we have set up and shared it with everybody, and the meeting materials are in there. So Bert, if you're not getting them, I will double check to make sure that you have access.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Great, Bert. Thank you. Thank you for letting me clarify that, and we'll make sure that's taken care of.
Sorry.
No worries. No worries. I appreciate you bringing that up because that is clearly very important. So, all right, wonderful. Well, then who would like to go first in sharing with us what they have found in current policy or practice to be especially effective around transparency and disclosure requirements? Brian, go ahead.
Thank you. I don't mean to dominate, but I found that the requirement of the legislature that was initiated about 2 years ago that now require districts, especially those created after 2000, to have websites, and on those websites to post their agendas for meetings coming up at least 24 hours in advance. Before that, pursuant to the statute that was adopted many years earlier, I believe it was in 2009, the meeting notices could be posted on other places, such as they could be posted on a fence post, or they could be posted on the Special District Association website or something like that that people didn't know about. So I have found that since the requirement is that meeting agendas need to be posted on the district website, and the website information needs to be shared, I think that's a great improvement.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate that. And just a reminder, that is for everything created after 2000. Is that correct?
And Zachary may know better off the top of his head, but I believe, Zachary, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it's only districts organized after 2000 have to have this posted on their website.
That is correct.
Great, great. Thanks for that, Brian. Others on the group, things that are working particularly well in your experience. Yes, Christopher. Yep, you have to unmute. There you go.
There we go.
There you go.
As a developer, we believe that one of our primary responsibilities is to disclose and after we finish that, to disclose and then disclose some more. So the disclosure requirements are vital, and we always try to take it an extra couple of steps and make sure that the community, through other means, newsletters, other communications, mass emails, and so forth, that our communities know that the meetings are occurring, understand how the district works, and encourage them to become a participant. So we think the guidance that we get from the legislation is great. The practice is molded around that, and we think it's working well.
Great. Thank you, Christopher. Steve Odoricio.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
Please.
I think, I mean, if you look at the presentations we got, they're meeting all the check boxes of what you would want somebody in the community to be able to have access to. So the question is why do people still feel like they can't access, they can't understand, and they cannot participate? And so a lot of times we have it, you know, using examples of other areas of law or just general usability. What's the user experience in trying to actually meaningfully understand, access, understand, and participate? And I think we need to find out the answer to that, because there is a feeling that people are overwhelmed with information. They don't know how to differentiate fine print here from fine print over there. There's a lot of language that talks about what could be, that there's some general thing, but the constituents that I'm hearing from about these issues that are concerned are specifically concerned about the lack of predictability or consistency in what they feel like their perception is. Now, I would be willing to bet that we could come up with a lot of things where we say, yeah, you woulda, coulda, shoulda been here, and this is where the information was, but we're still collectively failing in making it meaningful. There's a difference between having access to data and access to information and being able to understand it and use it. And I think we really need to dive in and find out, why is it that people still feel that this is a black box to them?
That's a fabulous point, and I wrote that down, access, understanding, and participating, because I think that'll be a great prompt for a question on what's not working well, and then transitioning into some of those suggestions for improvement. So excellent tee up on that. Anything else? Oh, yes, go ahead.
I do have another thing. So
yes, go ahead.
When they were designing these, I think that part of the challenge that I'm having is when designing these systems and these disclosures, the question that comes to me is, how was it designed, and what was the expectation that people, whether it's the actual constituents and taxpayers or even the local government? I am with the local government. I receive these notifications. What am I supposed to do with them?
Mm-hmm.
Who's supposed to do, like, what is an end user supposed to do with it? What can they do? I think that's part of the challenge. Now, for us in Adams County, we established a process where for the initial upfront review of the service plan, we, as a matter of policy by our choice, hire a fiduciary who can understand and take the time to go through the financial review as well as the service plan. And then the next question is what are we supposed to do with those annual reports? Are we supposed to have somebody who sits there and reads the few hundred or dozens of annual reports that come through and then try to find out where we need to, like, ask for more information? Because I did hear that we could ask for more information. We can change some of the parameters of the annual report. And then the same goes with the quinquennial review. What kind of support do we have for local governments to understand their obligations and opportunities to have more meaningful engagement and what is deemed to be oversight? Because a lot of the folks in these cities and the counties, they get this stuff and they don't know what to do with it. Mm-hmm. It's a big issue in Adams County, particularly in Commerce City, and a few places where folks are paying a lot of money on Metro District. So it's something that came to the forefront of us, but we're having to kind of invent the wheel, like kind of reinvent the wheel almost every time somebody comes up with some new challenge. And so I think we're starting to get there, but when I talk to folks around the state, they just don't know what the hell to do with some of the information. And it's now a burden placed on them.
All right. So it sounds like some missed opportunities that we can dive a little deeper into around that. Perfect. I'll give it one last call for anyone who'd like to share something that is working particularly well with existing statute or process, just so make sure we have a complete conversation on this. This be anything that you've just found to be a positive improvement over the last couple of years, or something that's communication related, feedback you've heard from colleagues or constituents or other stakeholders that you'd like to share. Brian, yes.
Yeah, one more thing that I thought of after I spoke earlier, and that is the recent requirement that call for nominations by Metropolitan District designated election officials be distributed in a more accessible manner. I think that there has been a big increase in the number of homeowners who are submitting their self-nominations and running for Metro District boards since the requirements were modified a couple of years ago, so that individual districts have to notify the homeowners in a manner that is more than just publishing on a newspaper that no one reads. What they're doing now is they're either including it on the website and or distributing it by mail and using it in a much more user-friendly manner and accessible manner that people will actually read, like in a newsletter.
Excellent, Brian. Thank you. All right, so we're going to go ahead and transition now into the what is not working well portion of the discussion. So again, as it relates just to transparency and disclosure requirements, what is it around current practice or policy that is just not working well? And I know Commissioner Odoricio gave us a starting list of some of those things, but which we can certainly talk about and expand on if some of you share that perspective, but we can also take some new ideas here too. So Natasha, I see your hand raised. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. Yeah, I'd like to build on a few of those. And again, I think these are opportunities. I live in a community which has multiple metro districts and adjacent to a number. I'm always amazed how many people don't know which district they are in and how hard it is for them to find that out. I think it's not fair to just say you may be in a metro district. Which district are you in? Early on in the presentation, when Julie said this is to make things affordable, when some of these districts have more than half the tax bill attributed to the metro district, I think it's relevant. They need to know which district, what the taxing is. My other 6 comments is in making disclosures better. It's one thing to say there's a service plan, but it's another thing to have them realize that a service plan can be modified, which kind of brings me right into number 3, that without local government education, I think they're very malleable and the service plans can be modified very easily. Then there's also the issue of the enforcement of the service plan, that there are no real teeth of when it's been violated. There's no consequence. And I would build then on my next point, Mr. Odoricio's issue of the quinquennial. Again, in theory, there's 3 statutory powers. The governing city or county commissioners can say, yep, everything's great, you're meeting your obligations, everything's good, you keep all your authorized debt. Other is, nope, it doesn't work, you're authorized, but unauthorized debt goes away. Choice 3 is, no, you have to modify your service plan because you don't meet your requirements of your service plan. But then you have local governments, I watched it happen firsthand, that come up with a 4th option. And until local government understands it, and we had a situation where a quinquennial, where the town attorney recommended a 4th non-statutory option of, well, we'll just allow you to reduce the authorized but unissued debt. So it wasn't options 1, 2, or 3 provided by statute. So I think what Mr. Odoricio points out in the quinquennial, it looks good on paper, but I think there's a lot in execution. Then more generally, I think the transparency and disclosures, I agree with Mr. Matisse, that having the website is great. I think that is a game changer, but then how we communicate that and what do we do when districts aren't compliant? What are the consequences? I think that is one of the biggest things when I look at this of there don't seem to be significant consequences civilly or criminally for failure to adhere to these things. And my final 2 points, and I'm sorry, my list was deep as I prepared for this meeting. Oftentimes in these master plan communities where metro districts are formed, declarant has control of the HOA. They have access to the HOA mailing list. They choose to mail when it serves them, but they don't give any service districts that same mailing list. So it does create an imbalance, I think. So if that information is available to the developer-controlled master district, why would it not be available to the service district? And I guess my last one is two. It's one thing to put notice out to eligible voters, but the reality, especially in the western slope of Colorado, where metro districts are very prevalent and the norm in second homeowner communities, but these are homes that are typically owned by a trust or an LLC, so they're not eligible voters. So now we've cut out a big chunk of the property owners who are not informed and not part of the process, who aren't eligible to vote. It is that ultimate dilemma of taxation without representation. And I think that really needs to be addressed. So sorry, my list here was long, but those would be the 7 things that I would love to hear some feedback from the others on the panel, if they share those concerns and how those might be addressed. But first and foremost, I think the most basic, I do not think it is fair to say you may be in a district. If you are buying property in a district, you should be told which district that is.
Great. Natasha, I appreciate how detailed your notes were, and I appreciate you connecting the dots to some of the comments that have also been shared already. I think that just helps for the purpose of the report and identify where there could be some consensus around some of these concerns. So thank you for that really thorough review. I had a quick clarifying question. I'm going to just lean on Zachary for this for a moment. Could you clarify again, just for the purposes of the report and the notes, Natasha's question or statement around when property is owned by a trust or an LLC, what does the statute currently say about that?
It's really beyond the scope of transparency and disclosure, but an eligible elector in Colorado is defined as a person who is registered to vote in Colorado and is a property owner or resident of the district. Okay. The property owner has a couple definitions of what that is, but where there is a trust, there's not an eligible elector associated with that.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate that. So
yeah, I just want the panel to recognize that in a mountain community, because many of them are VRBOs or for family estate planning purposes, if people are affording a second home that they are not VRBOing, typically part of their estate plan, that's going to at least be in a LLC as part of their estate planning. So I think we cannot underestimate how many properties are subject to the full taxation and all the regulations of a metro district without a voice. They need to be heard, and that's what I hear in my community and from my constituents.
Excellent. Thank you, Natasha. That's helpful clarification for me as well on how that works. So Representative Parenti, please go ahead.
Thank you. 2 comments on the issue of primarily disclosures. One is that for disclosures to potential home buyers, they should come earlier in the process. I think if you've ever purchased a home, you know that by the time you get to closing, it's pretty hard to back out if you don't understand, and there's no time to ask questions, right? If you don't understand what's been put in front of you. So I would like to see those disclosures happen much earlier in the home buying process before potential home buyers put money down, for instance. And then the second part of that is that the disclosures should not only go to people buying in a new build, they should go to anyone purchasing in a metro district. There's a lot of well-established metro districts, and just because the metro district has been there for a while doesn't mean that you understand what it is or what it does, and certainly not what the rules of the one you're buying into are. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Just a quick clarifying question, just going back, Zachary, to your slides on that purchasing requirement. Can you refresh our memory on when someone is purchasing in a special or in a metro district, And it may not be new build, it may be an established metro district. What are the disclosure requirements in that process?
It's a new requirement for sellers to provide purchasers with a website of the special district where the property is located.
Okay, and it names the specific special or metro district in that. So they know
It
which
just
they know where-
requires the website. The website,
Okay.
the web address will take you to that district's
Okay.
website.
And that's for anyone purchasing in a metro district, even if it's not new build.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate
And thank
that.
you, Sarah. As a clarifying, the website itself is not necessarily sufficient information to help people understand what they're getting into. So we were looking for a little bit more of a robust.
Got it. Understood. Fabulous. I see, Brian, your hand went up first, so go ahead.
Thank you, Sarah. First of all, I want to agree with what Steve Wildericio said earlier about the concern about too much fine print and too much disclosure, but disclosure that is not in a format that ultimate consumers, home purchasers can really use. For example, one of the requirements, and these are even for the new purchases of new homes, they have to disclose a mill levy. But what I have seen is that most homeowners don't really have a clue, or home purchasers don't really have a clue as to how a mill levy necessarily translates into the additional cost that's going to be imposed on them for the next 30 to 40 years. The other concern I have is that many of the disclosures, especially those, for example, on the standard form that is in Aurora, they indicate a mill levy, but they say it may be adjusted for changes in the residential assessment ratio retroactive to 2004. So it may say a 50 mil, your debt service is limited to 50 mils of property taxes, but then has a little asterisk subject to whatever the changes in the law have been since 2004. Well, as you know, the legislature has changed the residential assessment rate significantly since 2004. So the actual maximum may be closer to 57 or 60 mils instead of 50 mils. So that's a confusion as well. The second thing that I want to point out is that there's a tendency now. The disclosures that are filed with the county clerk and recorder when a metro district is created basically consist of the boundaries of the district and that there's a district that's created. The two most important pieces of information that may be available to, or maybe homeowners could use, would be the service plan. And there's no requirement that the service plan be recorded with the county clerk and recorder. And the Tabor voter authorizations that are in effect, there's no requirement that those are recorded, and it's very difficult to find those. So if a homeowner wants to figure out what exactly the service plan says, they may not be able to find it out. They may have to go to the court website that organized that district, and even then it may not be available because it may be a document that is under seal. I know a lot of these exhibits are now protected on court websites, and you have to pay $15 to access it. So that's a concern I have. I think the service plan and the Tabor voter authorizations should be used. Finally, I think that there's a tendency now. Many of these disclosures are applicable only to special districts under Title 32. There's a tendency now among the special district community to create authorities which have the ability to indirectly tax residents of metro districts through intergovernmental agreements and pledge arrangements. And the authority has a separate board that is not necessarily elected. It's actually not elected by the residents at all. There's no requirement that the authorities have post their meeting minutes or post their meeting agendas or even their schedules. And so what I'm concerned about is that there's been a lot of circumvention of the additional transparency requirements that have been adopted particularly the last 4 to 5 years, through creation of authorities and these these transparency requirements are not applicable to these authorities.
And Brian, could you give me an example of an authority just for everyone else's understanding of like the type of entity you're talking about?
Sure, I'll give you an example. One example is in Aurora, there's a large development called the Aurora Highlands. And the Aurora Highlands consists of, I think the numbers have changed. They've added a few more metro districts in there. But for example, one of the examples is that they have, I believe they have now 4 or 5 residential metro districts and 2 commercial districts and 1 developer control district. So there's about maybe 8 or 9 metro districts that are part of this authority. Each of the residential metro districts appoints 1 member to the authority board. Each of the commercial metro districts appoints 1 member to the authority board. And then the developer control district appoints, I believe, 7 members to the authority board. So they control the district. The way it works out is the authority has the ability to borrow money, and then the metro districts, and they also have the ability to spend the money. So they control the spending and the borrowing. They also then every year there's a pledge agreement, and every year they tell each of the member metro districts how much money they are required to contribute through this pledge agreement to the authority. And once again, the authority it's a Title 29, same transparency.
Zachary, I don't know if you have any additional insight on that structure. I know it's definitely outside of my level of knowledge, but is there anything else that you might be able to help explain that for folks who are keeping up, trying to keep up?
Well, I think Brian did a just fine job. Authorities are created by intergovernmental agreement under Title 29. And by statute, the authority has the powers of its underlying members that they have in common. So you can't, a park and rec district could not be in an authority necessarily with a water and sanitation district. They don't have a shared power to be able to undertake activity. All I'd say is the underlying districts still have the requirement to make the disclosures that I discussed earlier with respect to their individual districts. But there's not the same level of requirement under Title 29 for the authorities to provide certain disclosures.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Commissioner Odoricio, I saw you had your hand up earlier. Did you still want to comment?
I do.
Please.
I think what I heard earlier was that I'd like to clarify the distinction between new builds versus existing, the disclosure requirements. And I think one thing you could do is if there's a requirement that there's a website and the requirement that existing properties also sellers give a disclosure to the website, that the website has the same information that it would have had it been a new build. Perhaps, I guess my question would be for Mr. White, is there a standard format? So when people look at it from this disclosure versus this disclosure, they can compare apples to apples. And as we go through this process, I think it would be helpful for everyone if we were able to say, okay, here's an example, whether it's Brian's examples of some of those things that he was concerned about, or Mr. White's information about well, here's a requirement of a website, and let's go to this one website where the disclosure would be, and compare the disclosure between a new build and what a subsequent purchaser would see. I think showing some examples would be easy to do on the screen for us, maybe a link or whatever, but also let's actually see what we're talking about here. And then I also appreciate Brian's comment that somehow we need to be able to make the information understandable. How does a mill levy equate to a bottom line cost or tax? And I think that's fair to ask. And I think that we struggle with that at the county, having to explain, especially in light of the conversations that have happened lately with the special district and HH and all the other things that we've had to to deal with over the last few months. I think the other piece is the service plan and the Tabor voter authorization piece that was brought up. Is there a standard? I guess my question is there a standard about where that information needs to be stored, and is it in a standard way when somebody is doing research after they get, I guess, educated on how to do the research, that when they go from one metro district to another, they can look in the same location. There's some sort of file format or standard of consistency, so they again understand, can compare apples to apples. And then the final thing is I'd like to learn more about the non-Title II authorities, and particularly me in that area of Aurora Highlands. I would like to learn more about some examples, because I think what Mr. White was bringing up makes a lot of sense, that at the end of the day, you can still go to each of those individuals. I guess what makes sense is there some sort of collective disclosure we would want to see about what the collective group is making decisions on and how that could impact the folks in those individual members of that authority.
Great.
That's it for now.
Excellent. Good. That was a good digest. Appreciate that. Natasha, I see your hand raised. Go ahead.
Just going back and building on what Mr. O'Dorisio just said, yes, requiring the idea of kind of what are the standard terms of a website. Wholeheartedly agree with Mr. Matisse that the service plan and the Tabor authorization needs to be readily available to buyers. Yes, we do need to break it down. To me, it's somewhat analogous to seniors who get a reverse mortgage. They have to sign off on a level of understanding and have taken their class. Here, we're dealing with significant purchases. And again, in so many districts, just the Metro District piece, and I think some things in the service plan, there need to be a summary, not just what is your max mill levy, what is the debt authorization schedule, but what is the, expiration of the current debt and the current debt interest rates. Yeah, and trying to get people to understand the mill levy, I get that's an uphill battle, but there does need to be a much more user-friendly that people can understand where that's at. So I would wholeheartedly like to see those be made or mandatory. I think that would be a very meaningful transparency piece.
Great. Thank you, Natasha. And Bert, I see your hand is up. Please go ahead.
I just want to dovetail on what Natasha said and what Steve said before. What I'm seeing is basically that there's a lack of education of homeowners as to what is going on and how this all works. Seems to me that we maybe I'm jumping into the next session. Should I stop talking?
No, you finished your thought, but I was actually going to suggest after this last piece, we'll go ahead and move into the solutions mode. So please go ahead.
One of the solutions,
you can get us there, Bert.
One of the solutions, it seems to me, would be that there should be a 30-minute video available to all purchasers of property in a metro district to explain things like debt service, mill levy, Tabor, all of the things, and especially the comprehensive list that Natasha came up with before, explaining what all those things are. We already disclose, we have notice. There should be some education there that would basically explain what all of these things are so that homeowners are not going in blind. Now, probably 90% of the homeowners will ignore it because they have other things on their mind. But to have it available as an educational tool would address many of the issues that we've discussed here before. And especially some of the ones that Steve was talking about is, who's doing what and how does it work? So it seems to me that maybe that would be a good solution.
Excellent, Bert. Thank you. So Bert did a great job transitioning us into that solutions part of our conversation today. We've got about 20 minutes left for us to have that discussion around what sort of improvements you could suggest as committee members to this process to address some of these concerns or reinforce some of the positive things already happening or extend them a little bit. This is your chance to offer those suggestions for the report and to just inform the conversation going forward. So on that solutions note, Natasha, I think I saw your hand raised. Did you want to jump in?
Sure, and I jumped in. I have a list of others, but just wanted to build on that last comment. I think one of the other key disclosures, and again, should be on the website, easily accessible along with the service plan and the Tabor authorization, I think one of the biggest frustrations I hear without question is constituents realizing that it's a master control district, taxpayer district. So if there's going to be a master and a service district, that should be very clearly spelled out, as well as which of those districts are still under, are they developer affiliated control or are they homeowner controlled? I think those are the questions I tell people to ask now as they buy in metro districts. Is it a master servant setup? Who controls which boards? And I think, you know, it was said so eloquently just before me, if I polled 50 of my neighbors, do I think more than 5 would even know our Metro District website? And we've been a very proactive community. So I get that a lot of people won't look at this, but I think the more we can make it available and make it user-friendly. But those would be the two I think also need to be in the disclosures again. Is it a multiple district? Is there a control district and a tax district? And then the control of that board needs to be part of the disclosure.
Great. Thank you, Natasha. Other folks that would like to weigh in, we have talked, we've sort of tap danced around some solutions. So this is a really good opportunity to maybe expand on a few ideas you might have mentioned, but now you can expand on it a little bit more. Brian, I see your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And the first two ideas, I think we've already talked about a little bit. One suggestion that I would have is to require that that metro districts record with the county clerk and recorder their service plans so that it's readily available. And they also, they should have a current version of their service plan as amended on file with the local government information system of the Department of Local Affairs. Similarly, I think the Tabor voter authorizations should be recorded and also listed with the Department of Local Affairs local government information system. So that's an easy one. The second suggestion is that the same transparency requirements that we have recently required for Title 32 metro districts, I think they should also be applicable to authorities under Title 29 that are combinations of 2 or more, or that include 2 or more metropolitan districts in them. And then the third suggestion, and this is one I've been really pushing for a long time. I think that on any purchase contract, there needs to be like a Truth in Lending Act disclosure, similar to that, a black box that basically sets forth the cost of that metro district. And it should have a black box, and it basically says, because you are purchasing in this metropolitan district, your share of the authorized debt is anticipated to be X amount. Maybe it's $30,000, $40,000, $100,000. And then another black box. Your estimated cost over the 30-year duration of the bonds is estimated to be, and it would once again indicate the total cost by being in a metro district for paying off the debt service. And then a third line item, which is your expected annual additional amounts for taxes, for fees, and for operating expenses are anticipated to be X, and it would list, you know, $1,000, $2,000, whatever it might be. And that way, in a nice, simple black box form, the homeowner has all the information available when they purchase the home and can make a reasonable assessment of it.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate that. Let's see. Commissioner, I see your hand raised. Please go ahead.
So when I look at that, and I appreciate what Brian was talking about as the local government information system, and I put a link of it out there on our chat.
Yep.
You can actually scroll through and look at some of the examples. And when when certain metro districts use the actual standard form and they actually use the DOLA website as their website, it's fairly standard. And then if you click on a few, you'll see if they use their own custom website, it's inconsistent. One thing I also think is important is when using this tool, you can look at the different filings, and that's fairly consistent. So you can compare apples to apples in that standpoint. But what I'm concerned about is the actual disclosure to get to this point. Does somebody have to go around through a custom website to get here, or do they have to know to go to DOLA? I think I understand the request about the clerk and recorder disclosures, but I could guarantee, I mean, I'm not sure that clerk and recorder is any easier than to look this up, to be honest with you. In most situations, to be able to get the data and actual documents, I think this format works well. But I would love to see how we can improve it. I just think that we need to lean on DOLA to help with the implementation of making this more usable. Or I think it's actually really good, but like, how do we help translate that to the end user, to the taxpayer? And so what I like is that we're now shifting focus from here's all the challenges, but I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel entirely. And I don't think we need to throw it out either, the baby with the bathwater. I think what we're doing is we've effectively identified today, how can we better leverage some of the existing tools and techniques that we already have? And I'd love to hear if anyone thinks if that's different. Because I think that it shows like, look, I'm not hearing anything that says that we have to throw out the law, rebuild all the law. I'm not hearing that anyone says that this DOLA website is horrible, or maybe we can make some tweaks, but I think it gives us some focus on how to apply some of those principles and those challenges that we're hearing to improve the existing systems. And I think that's a big win for us today.
Well said, Commissioner. Thank you. So again, going back to just our prompts and making sure that we're kind of uncovering the content that we need to in this conversation. Knowing that you will go to this report is going to go to an audience of policymakers. Are there any other areas that we haven't specifically suggested that that someone would like to weigh in on now with some suggestions for improvement? Yes, Natasha. Oh, Natasha, you're on mute.
Apologies.
No worries.
Absolutely. And going back to the comment from Mr. Matisse and Commissioner, I think recording with the clerk and recorder, the good news is it's going to show up on the title report. I think that's where a lot of buyers are going to get the heads up. So I do like it there. I agree with you with standardized. Here's what we see wholeheartedly. I think for policymakers, we need to have them understand that we are disenfranchising so many property owners that are fully paying these taxes. Again, going back to all the properties that are owned by some type of business entity or a trust that are wholly disenfranchised. They're subject. So we need to find a way that these notice requirements, the notice to voters, that even if they can't vote, which again, whole different topic, but they need to be included in this process. They need to understand the taxation on the properties that they own through a business entity or through a trust. I did, going back to the comment and the suggestion from Mr. Matisse, I think what needs to be included in the website and having that standardized as we're talking about, I think we might want to really delve into that quite a bit. That might merit a whole different discussion. And I think for me, the biggest one here is, again, it's one thing to give notice. And again, there's so much that does have to be put in a form that's digestible. But again, what's amazing to me, having now watched this for a decade and a half and participated, both representing developers and living in a metro district and adjacent to metro district, is so you have players that don't follow the rules. So what? I mean, and that really dovetails into what we'll be looking at as a task force later. But I think without teeth and consequences, it's all nice paper we can frame on the wall, and there's nothing more to it.
And Natasha brought that up earlier about consequences if some of these practices aren't followed. Yeah, that's a good point. Great. All right. Have we exhausted our solutions yet? Are there more? Okay.
The only one question I have is, did we address the issue of how debt is created? Are we doing that later? How debt is created and who invests in the debt? And is that part of the discussion today on disclosures, or is that part of the future discussion?
I believe that is going to be a future discussion. It's part of the topics that were legislatively mandated. I do know taxation is called out specifically, and I think there may be some topics around debt that will be covered at that point, but not necessarily not within transparency and disclosure. Although, I mean, go
It
ahead.
will come back
Yeah.
later. It'll
Yeah.
come back later as a discussion around those topics. That's fine.
I would
Yeah,
hope it
yeah.
would also be incorporating your comment an idea of what are the mandatory components in the website. I mean, if your developer holds your debt and the interest rate on that debt and the term, it's the black box that Mr. Matisse talked about. That seems obvious, and it seems something that every taxpayer and homeowner in a district should be entitled to know.
That's that intersection of that topic plus, you know, with the disclosure part. Yeah.
In terms of transparency, having that be, as we talk about what's in a website that's constructive, again, I still stand by, you need to know if you're in a bifurcated control district, you need to know who controls those boards. So I would ask the commissioner's comment to be part of the website requirements.
Great.
Are there
Right.
other ideas from folks who haven't talked a lot? I feel bad because there's like 3 of us that have talked a lot, and I just want to know, like from Mr. White or some of the others, like as you kind of have the hood up, are there some things that you think that we could offer proactively to kind of make some changes and improvements? And other folks from industry, I feel like that this is not supposed to be a beat on industry round table here. It's supposed to be a question about how to make improvements, and I think a lot of the practitioners who tend to work with industry might have the best ideas.
Correct. We do have some of those on the call today. So I would second that suggestion. If you have not had a chance to speak up, if there's anything that you'd like to add before we wrap up the conversation. Well, Commissioner, you did a good job you opened the door to that. So great. So we are getting into the last few minutes of our time here, and certainly we aren't required to go right until 4 o'clock if folks are feeling like we've had an opportunity to really get all of the issues out on the table and have had enough time to think strategically around what those solutions and suggestions might look like that we could put in the report. So I might just put a last call out there to the group if there's anything else from a solutions standpoint that you might suggest for consideration that might improve some of the issues we flagged today around transparency and disclosure. This is your time. This is your opportunity to do that. All right. Well, with that, we will actually end a couple minutes early on our presentation today. However, I do want to just give you a little sneak peek of our schedule before we wrap up, just to let you know kind of the where and when of our next few meetings, just as a reminder. So let me just do a quick screen share so that you can see that. All right. So hopefully you all can see that now, the slide, just with our schedule for the upcoming few meetings that we have. We will be meeting again in the new year on January 8th, and that is going to be concerning the topics of foreclosure and the transition to a common interest community. And again, this is straight from the legislative mandates that were provided to the task force. January 22nd, we'll be discussing governance policies, including voting and elections. February 5th will be tax levying authority and practices. And then on February 19th, tentatively, we are planning to address the HOA task force report. As you know, that was also in the enabling legislation for this group, that we would review some of the outcomes of that HOA report and see if there was anything that would intersect with some of the topics we are discussing. And the timing of that, it looks like that will be the February 19th meeting when that is going to take place. And then, of course, any other emerging topics that have been coming up in our discussions to date. All of these meetings are again going to be held from 2 to 4 p.m. And the agenda and any of our pre-read material will be provided 1 week prior. So with that, I can certainly wrap up this portion of the meeting. Just want to thank everyone for their thoughtful participation today. We came to the, you definitely followed the meeting norm of being prepared. So gold star to all of you who had given this some thought in advance and had jotted down a few of those questions and those issues that you wanted to share. That made for a really productive conversation and we were able to cover quite a bit in our time together today. I also want to thank our presenters, Julie Stackhouse and Zachary White, for setting the stage for a really informed conversation this afternoon. I think that worked really well. So appreciate Zachary, you staying on as our subject matter expert to answer a few of these tough questions that came up. I will turn this back over to the Dora team if you have any final comments that you would like to provide before we wrap up the call.
So we do. Thank you for putting this together.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for participating. With that, we'll go ahead and end our meeting today, and just want to wish everyone a very happy holiday season. Safe travels if you are traveling for the holidays. And we look forward to welcoming you in the new year for our first meeting on January 8th. So take care, everyone, and have a good holiday season.